Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the video. In today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to predict the QB carousel for the 2021 offseason. At this point, all the games this season have determined the outcome of quarterbacks that could potentially be on the move. The 4 teams that are left are pretty much all going to retain these quarterbacks next year unless Tom Brady decides to retire. I don't see that happening though. I think he's going to try to play another year or two. So all the games at this point are pretty much determined the outcomes of who's going to be on the move. So I'm going to give an early prediction of what teams are going to be looking for quarterbacks and what quarterbacks will go where. So if you're interested in videos like these, please let me know. I like making a lot of different types of videos about sports, music, things like that. So please like or comment. Let me know what you think. So for the QB moves this offseason, so I've broken this into tiers. The first tier are quarterbacks that are locked in. There's a tier 1A, which are teams that are pretty much going to keep their quarterbacks, but there's going to be media-driven stories or whatnot about QB moves. Tier 2, these are what I would call the warm seat, as teams that their quarterback looks like they're going to be they're on the team next year, but depending on how next year goes, they could make any variety of decisions of what the long-term future is going to be. Then tier 3, I would describe that as the hot seat of these teams are potentially going to move their quarterback this offseason. And then tier 4, likely out. These are quarterbacks that I feel will be moved this offseason, and these teams are going to be looking for new quarterbacks. So let's start with tier 1. And I don't think we really need to discuss too many of these teams. The Buffalo Bills, Tennessee Titans, Kansas City Chiefs, Los Angeles Chargers, Cincinnati Bengals, Philadelphia Eagles, Green Bay Packers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Seattle Seahawks, and Arizona Cardinals are all pretty much going to keep these quarterbacks for the foreseeable future unless Brady decides to retire. Quick note, though, is I think Philadelphia is going to go with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. I think that's pretty much universally what people think they're going to do, unless bearing any surprise. This next tier, these are 3 teams: Dallas Cowboys, Baltimore Ravens, and Cleveland Browns. That teams, the media is going to try to create these stories that these quarterbacks will be moved for Deshaun Watson, who I'm going to get to in a little bit. But I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think these teams have too much invested into these quarterbacks. I don't see them moving unless something really surprises me, there were a lot of surprises this past offseason, so you never really know. But that's just my prediction. Tier 2, so these are warm seat quarterbacks. These are teams that I think will keep these quarterbacks for next year, but depending on how it goes, they could be anywhere between locked in or on the way out, and that's the Miami Dolphins, Pittsburgh Steelers, Las Vegas Raiders, New York Giants, Minnesota Vikings, Carolina Panthers, and Los Angeles Rams. There's a lot of different stories we can get into with these quarterbacks, but for now I'm just going to leave it at that and assume that these guys are going to keep their seats next season. Then things start getting interesting. So tier 3, these are quarterbacks on the hot seat. I think these quarterbacks have potential to be on the team next year as their starter, but I could also see them being moved. I wouldn't really be surprised with that either. The New York Jets, the Denver Broncos, Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, Atlanta Falcons, San Francisco 49ers. So 3 that I want to hit on. So first of all, the New York Jets and Sam Darnold, this is going to be a major domino effect. They have the number 2 pick. So are they going to go with Sam Darnold and then trade the pick for more assets, or are they going to go with Justin Fields and then trade Sam Darnold? I think they should do the former of the two because this team needs a lot of help in a lot of areas. I don't think Darnold is the problem. I think they need to surround him with more pieces. I think having Robert Saleh will help their defense. But I don't think they're actually going to do that. I think especially in that media market, they're going to really push the team in the direction of taking Justin Fields. So I think Sam Darnold is going to be moved. And then the other big ones are the Detroit Lions and Atlanta Falcons. So Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan, these guys are good enough to be tier 1 quarterback situations, but they're not on good teams. And these could also be major domino effect moves depending on what happens with these guys. But they're both under contract and they're going to have to be traded for significant pieces. I don't know if it's going to happen this offseason, but I also would not be surprised if the teams decide to move on from them. So let's get into the quarterbacks that are likely to move on. So I think the New England Patriots are going to move on from Cam Newton. He didn't have a very good season. Jacksonville Jaguars are going to move on from Gardner Minshew, Mike Glennon, etc. because they're going to get Trevor Lawrence. I think that's a pretty easy decision on their part. Washington, New Orleans, and Indianapolis Colts have Alex Smith, Drew Brees, and Philip Rivers. I think all those quarterbacks are going to retire this offseason. But I mean, I think Philip Rivers may come back, but I don't necessarily see that happening. And then Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. So it's looking like he's going to get moved. There's been a lot of stories that have kind of led us to believe that. I mean, the team his management has been absolutely horrendous the last 2+ years. I think that there's a good chance that they move on from him, and this is going to determine how everything develops. I think because this is the best quarterback available, and depending on what team goes after him, that's going to set off other major moves that'll happen throughout the offseason. So let's start with that, and when we get into where these quarterbacks will go. So the best offer for Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, is the Miami Dolphins. They could offer Tua, other defensive players potentially. They could offer draft picks. It would actually be really ironic if they gave Houston their pick back. I think that would be really funny. But I don't see them doing that because I think that Tua's not exactly played well, but it's still early to judge him. So I don't think they're going to move on from him. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they did that. What I think is going to happen, though, is I think that my prediction right now is that he's going to go to the 49ers. So Houston has, I don't think a lot of people really talk about this, but Jimmy Garoppolo has been a pretty good quarterback. He's had his ups and downs, not always the most consistent. But if you are losing Deshaun Watson, that's a pretty good insurance replacement for Watson. So if San Francisco is willing to offer, say, their first-round pick and Garoppolo plus some other players, they got some pretty good defensive players. That could be a very good offer too. I think that's the route they're going to take. And I see Watson next year. My prediction right now is he goes to the 49ers. And talk about how loaded that NFC West would be next year. That would be really exciting. But so if Watson goes to the 49ers, then Garoppolo would be the Texans quarterback in that scenario. There's potential they could try to flip him, but I don't think the management would take advantage of that opportunity. So we'll go from there. Another big trade piece that's out there right now is Carson Wentz. He's got in a very difficult situation in Philadelphia. I think the move that's been talked about and I see happening as well is him going to the Indianapolis Colts. Colts are really a quarterback away. Philip Rivers is a serviceable quarterback, but he's you can tell like that they have a good roster, but if they had a quarterback that was as good as some of these tier 1 guys that are locked into their situation, they could be Super Bowl contenders. Philip Rivers just does not have it anymore, and he's probably going to retire this offseason. So this is a good opportunity potentially to go after somebody like Carson Wentz, who could fill that role. He's led a team. He's been an MVP before, might have led the Eagles to the Super Bowl if he didn't get injured. So I think that'll be a good move for them, especially since he's worked with Frank Reich, their coach, in the past. So that move would set off Wentz going to the Indianapolis Colts. So now let's go to the draft. Trevor Lawrence is going to go to the Jags. The Jets are going to get Justin Fields in this scenario. So what's going to happen to the other quarterbacks? So let's start with the Jaguars. So what's going to happen to Gardner Minshew? I think Minshew is going to be in a backup role to one of these tier 2 teams that I talked about. Because if they're going to put themselves in a position to see if their quarterback is going to be the future. Minshew is a guy who's been productive in the past. He's just not exactly had the best pieces around him. So for instance, you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. This would be a pretty valuable or a pretty smart decision on their part because Minshew would be a better backup than Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, and he can learn behind Big Ben for a year. And then if Big Ben doesn't play well or if he decides to retire, depending on how Minshew impresses the staff, he could be the next one. So that would be a potential move to look out for there. Other moves that could be made. So who would take Sam Darnold? And this is where I don't know. This is one of my takes of what could happen. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Bill Belichick takes a shot on Sam Darnold, especially while this guy has not necessarily got the best value. Belichick could swipe in and get him for cheap, use their cap space on some other guys to help build the roster. Darnold could potentially be the replacement quarterback that they could experiment with on a relatively cheap cost right now. I think this would be a smart move for the Patriots, and I think that makes a lot of sense for both parties. So, what teams are out there? So you still got the Washington football team, New Orleans Saints, and the Indianapolis Colts. Well, Indianapolis gets Carson Wentz, my bad. So you're still looking at those two teams, Washington and New Orleans. What are they going to do? So I think that what will happen with Washington is that they'll likely keep their current quarterbacks that they have. They'll probably give Taylor Heineke a shot because he played pretty well in the playoffs. Kyle Allen is used to Ron Rivera's system. I think what they'll probably do is they'll go after one of these younger guys like Trey Lance, maybe Mac Jones. They'll probably try to groom a younger quarterback to see if this guy, and then keep their current situation because they're a team that's going to rely on defense. New Orleans, I could see them potentially making a big move, but I think what they'll likely do for the meantime is go with some combination of Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. See if either of them could really be the answer because they both have been starting quarterbacks and played pretty well in games before. They just need to improve consistency. So that pretty much covers all the quarterbacks that I spoke about. But the last two teams that I talked about, Washington and New Orleans. So these are the two teams that I think will be in play for potentially Matt Ryan or Matt Stafford because they might, for now, experiment with this their current quarterbacks, but in this scenario that I've created, watch out for these two teams potentially go after Stafford or Ryan. Either of them would be great fits with those teams because they already have a great roster around them. Especially the Saints, if they can get somebody like Matt Ryan. I know that would be crazy to think about because they're rivals, but it makes a lot of sense for both parties, and same with Matt Stafford. So look out for those two teams potentially getting involved there. So that's my prediction for the QB carousel. Could be bigger than that depending on what these teams decide to do, but that's my early prediction in January about what's going to happen in a couple months. So if you like this video, please let me know, and thanks for watching. All right, see you guys.